Peace, family. Welcome to another episode of We Charge Colonialism podcast and book club. I am Ikemba Ojore, host, organizer, member of the International People's Democratic Uhuru movement, as well as the Abundance and Ujamaa movement. Also a professor of history, and feeling good to be here and have these discussions. So, pass it over to you, Frank.
Peace, everyone. This is Frank, host for the Revelation of Repatriation Educational Lecture Series.
All right. We are your team. Natasha may be joining us. Heard from her earlier. She's the third part of our team. But until she joins us, we're going to keep it moving. So this is We Charge Colonialism podcast and book club. We are a media team that addresses colonial issues as it pertains to African people in particular. We look to combat the narrative about African people, look to combat colonial media who likes to portray the situation of African people or conditions of African people as something brought about by their own doing. And so we are here to expose colonialism and imperialism and to make sure that we have the knowledge, the information to arm ourselves to be able to combat not just the media, but also to decolonize our minds, decolonize our bodies through the building of institutions, independent institutions. So peace to everybody that's out there. Appreciate you joining us. But before we move on, just a few things, a few changes. Frank, you want to talk about your podcast on Fridays?
Yeah, but I think Natasha is here before I can continue. She's
okay. I'll bring her up.
Yeah.
All right, Sister Natasha, you want to introduce yourself?
Peace, everyone. I'm Natasha, member of the Northeast Political Prisoners Coalition, educator, community activist, and organizer. Free them all.
Free them all. Free them all. All right.
All right. Yes. So, as Nkima was saying, so we have some issue with the Friday show because I have started work. So I work from home, as you can see. The job gave me computer assistant, everything. I have a home here, so I now work from home. So I work Monday to Friday, 8 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. So we can't do the Friday show at 10 a.m. So right now I'm thinking, or we are thinking doing it Friday, let's say Sunday at either 1 a.m. or let's say 1 p.m. 1 p.m. or 10 a.m. But it's up to the audience as well, because without you we cannot do the show. So if you want us to do the show during a weekday, but it have to be after 4:30 p.m. So based on your schedule as well. So if you want to do it on a weekday after 4 p.m., like let's say 5 p.m. or 6 p.m., Friday or Monday or Tuesday, you can write in the chat and let us know that you want a show to be done during a weekday, either 6 p.m. or 5 p.m. Or if you want to be done on Sunday, 1 p.m. or 10 a.m., you can still do that. So give us your suggestion in the chat as to when you want the show to be done, but it have to be after 4:30 p.m. if you want it a weekday.
All right, peace. Appreciate that, letting the people know. So we're going to get into our weekly roundup, but today, just to make everybody aware, we shifted. We was doing the ISIS paper. I feel like we have been on the ISIS papers for like 2 months. Yeah. But there's a lot have been going on where Saturdays have been busy. So we've kind of been a bit inconsistent on the Saturdays. So I think we only got like 2 chapters. But I wanted to switch it up. So we're going to do Stolen Black Labor by Omali Yeshitela. We'll be doing that in the second half of this podcast. But before we get into that study, and there's a link, the Google Drive is in the chat. So you can click on the Google Drive and find the book there and read along with us in the second half of this podcast. So we're going to move into our weekly roundup. And I'm just going to quickly read a statement by Black Alliance for Peace. There's some things that's going on in Georgia that I just want to make everybody aware of. With a lot of people may be aware of Cop City and the movement to stop Cop City. So I want to read. Recently, there has been a raid that's been happening a lot. A lot of people in the Black Liberation Movement are being raided and being deemed anti-American, anti-establishment. Where, isn't this supposed to be a free country? Aren't you supposed to have free speech? That's what they say. And wasn't the founders of this American empire, weren't they anti-establishment? Weren't they like anti, with the British, anti-establishment, anti-government? And they had a whole American Revolution to overturn the system. So, but that's the contradiction when we're dealing with imperialism and colonialism. So I'm going to share the screen. I'm just going to read the statement. If y'all have some thoughts, y'all can, chime in afterwards. But I just want to bring this to everyone's attention. All right. So down in Atlanta, they're building this Cop City where it's a training ground to militarize the police down there. And why is the problem? I'm not in Atlanta, but it doesn't matter where we are, whether we're in Philadelphia, New York City. If we allow this to happen, all this is going to turn into the blueprint of what the police can do in other cities around the country. And I will argue that the police have already been militarized, but this is just taking it to a whole nother level. They're even sending people over to Israel. So let me read this before I, go on about this. But this is from the Black Agenda Report. If you are not, checking up on the Black Agenda Report and the news and articles on there, make sure that you do. So this is abolish Gili. Is it Gili or Gilly? I'm gonna say Gilly, unless y'all heard something different. So abolish the Gilly program and stop Cop City. A statement from Black Alliance for Peace Atlanta Citywide Alliance. The Black Alliance for Peace Atlanta Citywide Alliance, BAP Atlanta, rooted in the legacy of anti-imperialism, anti-war, and pro-peace movements within the African Black community, firmly denounces the ongoing exchange between the Georgia International Law Enforcement Exchange (GILLI) program, the Atlanta Police Foundation's Atlanta Police Leadership Institute, and the Israeli Occupying Forces scheduled May 14th, 22nd, 2023 in the Urban Warfare Training Facility, Cop City. As an empire conceived in settler colonial violence, the United States continues to impose systems of militarized control upon African, Black, Indigenous, and Palestinian communities. This oppressive reality manifests itself through international interventions, such as the GILLI program, as well as domestic initiatives, like the proposed $90 million police training facility, Cop City. Local residents and activists have been demanding an end to GILLI for many years. GILLI's training exchange with the Israeli Occupying Forces disrespectfully falls during the 75th anniversary of Nakba, the violent displacement of more than 750,000 Palestinians during the 1948 invasion of Palestine by Zionist settlers, an event marked by the bloody, brutal, destructive ethnic cleansing and occupation of more than 500 Palestinian villages. This violent occupation continues today with the complete and unwavering support from the United States military-industrial complex, particularly in military assistance. According to the 2022 Congressional Research Service report, Israel is the largest cumulative recipient of U.S. foreign assistance since World War II. To date, the United States has provided Israel $150 billion, current or non-inflation adjusted dollars, in bilateral assistance and missile defense funding. At present, almost all U.S. bilateral aid to Israel is in the form of military assistance from 1971 to 2007. Israel also receives significant economic assistance. The continued mass settler violence against Palestinians and a proxy state supported by the United States for geopolitical reasons has established an enduring legacy of conflict and injustice in the region amid escalating violence against Palestinians. This disturbing reality illuminates the web of global imperialism and racial oppression that stretches from the occupied West Bank to Atlanta's neighborhoods. Simultaneously, we face the Atlantic City's government insidious plot to leave 381 acres of stolen Muskogee Creek land known as Weelaunee Forest to the Atlanta Police Foundation. This massive proposed police training facility, Cop City, funded predominantly by taxpayers, is a brutal example of colonial capitalist fascists in action. Designed to refine the tactics of urban warfare and repression, Cop City epitomizes the connections between white supremacy-fueled genocide, militarism, and oppression. It threatens to expand the cycle of state-sanctioned violence and political repression upon working-class African, Black, Indigenous communities, and would further expand the Gilley program's resources and capabilities. BAP Atlanta asserts the unwavering link between the liberation struggles of African, Black, and Indigenous peoples. We stand against the oppressive force of white supremacy, capitalism, patriarchy, and colonization. We demand the immediate abolition of the Gilley program, a halt to construction of Cop City, and accountability for all the acts of state-sanctioned violence. Our collective human rights, our dignity, and our very lives are at stake. We demand justice, transparency, and the immediate cessation of all activities contributing to the operation of Gilley and Cop City. Abolish the Gilley program, stop Cop City, no compromise, no retreat. So that's from Black Agenda Report website. And I will also encourage people to check out Black Power Media. They usually cover a lot of these stories, particularly with Cop City, but they a range of stories that's dealing with Black struggle and resistance to colonialism and imperialism. So they do a great job of just keeping us aware, another media outlet that combats colonialism. So I'm gonna stop there and pass it to you guys if you had any thoughts before we move on to the next story.
I don't have too many thoughts because I think your reading of the statement really outlined a lot of what's happening. And just, in terms of this even brings to light the importance of really understanding neocolonialism and how it operates in many of the same ways that colonialism in the past has operated. And so the way that you see Israel and America supporting each other and training up and building up more of a police force to create more of a hyper surveillance police state, and exchanging materials and weapons and tactics in that way to produce the same outcome in the same way, like, what we're talking about, the way that Europeans colonized the Americas and the tactics that were used and continue to be used in order, especially when we're thinking of police, in order to maintain control and domination over the colonized people. You have the same thing going on with Israel, and they're just using the same tactics and helping each other out. So I think that's, just to add on to all of what you said.
Yeah, just to add up, in addition to that, the article is very great, and we should all know that the system of enslavement continued to the system of colonization on the African continent, and from that, it still continue around the world, and it still continue in the United States with African people. So, during the colonization period, right, the enslavement of African and the colonization of the African continent mostly was business people. And the European politician or the Western politician, what they do here is that they monitor their citizens, they monitor the European or the Westerner who go in other countries or who go on the African continent. They monitor them. And if these people go on the African continent to do things for themselves. But as long as the government, the United States government or the Western government see it as necessary that will benefit their continent or their nation, what they do, they support those individuals. So during the enslavement period, some of the people that went there, they were individual people, individual business owners. But the Queen of England, when she saw to is that it was going to benefit England, they supported those individuals. They gave financial assistance to those individuals and even military assistance to those individuals who were on the African continent to exploit African people, because the wealth of that exploitation was never going to stay in Africa, was going to go to England. And going to England, it will help to build the English economy. So that's how these people operate. And even up to current time, you can see it. Individual businesses or business owner or so-called entrepreneur or so-called investors who go on the African continent but never invest, because since the enslavement period up to 1884 Berlin Conference, those are investors, we call investors. They've been going on the African continent, but they never invested. But they exploit the African continent. How can you take, okay, and you don't put by what you take, but you take more than what you put in, and then you call it an investment, or you call it investor. Investments as well, you put in your resources, but they don't do that. They take and they come to invest in Europe, and we have these European politicians supporting it, like what we see in Uganda right now, which of course I'm going to talk about in the next topic. What we see in Uganda right now are individuals, okay, are individuals who are fighting for LGBT in Uganda. And the government of the United States support those individuals because it's going to benefit the United States government, and it will not benefit the African people or the Ugandan government. It won't benefit them. But because it will benefit the United States agenda, the United States also support those individuals who are in Uganda pushing LGBT, how they call it, or right, the so-called right against African people, because it will be in their favor to depopulate the African continent. It will be in their favor to exploit the African identity, to exploit the African culture, to exploit the African masses. It will be in favor of the West, but it will not be in favor of the African people and the Ugandan government. So what the United States is doing, threatening the Ugandan government, threatening African nations, if to say, only Uganda, that law have been passed, or only in Africa, that law have been passed. So the question we should be asking is, why the United States or why the West always focus on negativity to destroy African people? Why they always invest in the destruction of African people instead of investing in an area that will build and develop the African masses or the African people? So that is just to say, adding on an article of what that article says. The West will never do anything to invest or to empower African people because of their agenda.
I appreciate that. I just would say, like, you raised an important contradiction in regards to America throughout its history is always advocating for the rights, for the freedoms of people and under other governments and other nations, where inside America, they don't even extend rights or freedoms to the people in their own country, these same rights and freedoms that they're supposed to be advocating for, right? And so during the Civil Rights Movement and Black Power movement, they're around the world talking about, America is advocating democracy, we're spreading freedom, but Black people are suffering from colonial conditions in the same country that's advocating these freedoms and liberties around the world. So it's a serious contradiction. America is always a pretext to be in the business of other countries. And, so I know we can move on to your next story. Last thing I'll say is just like, stop Cop City. The only reason we need the police is because of this, because we live under an oppressive and exploitive system. African labor has been exploited, has been stolen, as we're going to get into in a minute. And this is the primary reason that you need police to contain liberation movements, to contain those people who have had their resources and property stolen, from keeping them from getting back what's rightfully theirs. And so they have to put these police and military in place. So but we'll talk more about that. We can go on to the next story though.
I can go with my story.
I was gonna say everybody is on mute right now.
Okay, so I'll go ahead and share my screen for a quick second. So the story that I'm reporting this morning is on gambling in Africa, and the rise of gambling in Africa, and the way it's been having detrimental effects on. Oh, I don't see my screen here for it to share. And the way that it's been having detrimental effects on the African population. So I'm gonna try to share it again, because for some reason it's not showing up on my thing.
Yeah, but I don't see it either.
Yeah. Here.
If you put it from your email.
Yeah, if you put it in the chat, I can.
Yeah, let me do that. Not now. Okay.
And peace to the fan. Thanks to everybody too for tuning in. Make sure y'all liking and sharing. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Make sure you supporting us. Also become a Patreon member. That's another way to support us so we can continue to do this work. Well, we're gonna do the work regardless, but you can support us, We're gonna do the work. Rain, sunshine, lint in our pockets, I'm about this. We're about this. Let's go.
So I sent you the link, but I can go ahead and start with the story while you're pulling it up. So
where did you send it at? I'm sorry.
Oh, I put it in the chat.
Private? Okay.
Yeah.
Private chat.
So it's called Regulatory Void, Online Gambling Firms Accused of Exploiting Lucrative African Markets. So already we know, even just from the title, this idea of African markets, right? Lucrative African markets signals the neo-colonial aspects and underpinnings of exactly what is going on here with these gambling agencies. So I'm going to read a little bit of just the beginning because it kind of tells you a little bit. And then after that, I'll just pick out a couple key things that it's important for people to know. So it said one morning in June 2021, Kedi Bonogwe was at home in her village in northern Malawi when she was told that the body of her 16-year-old son, Wati, had been found. He had killed himself. Bonogwe was shattered. I never expected anything like this to happen, she says. It was heartbreaking for so many reasons. And she says, I blame betting for his death. If it weren't for betting, he would still be alive. And so there's been an increase in suicide amongst the youth in Africa, in these countries, as it relates to this rise in betting. And the article was talking about how it really rose, especially like online betting rose within Africa, and particularly they're saying sub-Saharan Africa during the pandemic, and it's been continuing to rise. And so these European-based betting firms are all over Africa, and even going further into the rural areas and getting people to sign up for this gambling. And we know that part of the reason why Africa is susceptible to this type of predatory action in terms of all of these gambling firms is because of the colonial and current neo-colonial legacy of European colonization and the way in which they made sure to, you know, when these Western powers, France, Britain, Germany, all these different European countries that had colonized different parts of Africa, and when they left Africa, they made sure that Africa was not to be delinked from this, you know, capitalistic global capitalistic system. And so therefore they're able to stay open in the way that they made sure that they were to be continue to be linked to this global capitalist system is by, as we know, the CIA, FBI, the intelligence organization of Britain, making sure that they led coups, assassinated leaders, and also tied them to, you know, this new capitalistic World Bank system that exists now, and to make sure that, you know, the people stay poor and stay struggling and stay in a space where, you know, they're looking for any way out. And so one of the things that it talked about is that, you know, for a lot of young people in Africa, gambling is a source of money, how they make money, how they help their family. But even us in the US, we understand you know, gambling as it is and the problems that go along with gambling, the insidiousness, the what's the other word I'm looking for, like the destructive nature of gambling itself as a practice, and how it's put forth. And then obviously then later on, you know, they come out with these different types of programs or different types of interventions to help people, because now they have gambling problems. And a lot of the things that we're thinking that we see here when we think about people who have gambling problems with suicide, drug abuse, people, you know, destroying families. The article is talking about how all of that stuff is happening in Africa too. So it's not just that, you know, the companies are going in there, you know, and seeing Africa, you know, in the neo-colonial sense as other markets for them to continue to spread their like disastrous ideas and the disastrous practices. But also now you have the ills of America and the West happening within Africa, because, you know, these things are being taken on. Even the article goes on to say that researchers found that 41 countries where gambling is legal, only 2 had published reports on the impact of what's happening, but also that there's loopholes within. The study also concluded that, you know, gambling companies were able to take advantage of regulatory voids surrounding online forms of gambling and promotion of gambling products. And so they heavily promote gambling products by using like football stars and putting it all over in billboards or on TV as commercials. And they even went on to say that all the trends suggest that the gambling industry in sub-Saharan Africa has neocolonial characteristics. And so it says Africa is an attractive proposition for the gambling industry, with the masses of quote unquote untapped potential. Since 2020, online gambling across the continent has boomed, partly, like I said before, due to the COVID. And the revenue in the online gambling market is projected to reach 1.62 billion and, you know, 1.31 billion in euros in 2023. And so we see how Europeans are continuing to use and abuse African people with their illicit. So because these are things that are coming up out of the minds of Africans when we think about, you know, the types of practices that a society allows and a society you know, puts forth, and then going out and spreading them into other places that are, you know, that have legacies of colonialism, in order for them to continue to profit, in order for them to make sure that Europeans as a people continue to profit and live off of the destruction of African people. So it's, you know, we know that they're going to do it to their own people, but then we know that they're going to do it even worse to our people. And to those who they see as those worthy of colonization and those worthy of having the brunt of what of the negative aspects of whatever that they're creating. So I'm just gonna end it with one other quote from the article where it's talking about what's happening with families and so it says gambling, and so it's happening in Uganda, Zimbabwe, South Africa. I mean, there's different like a lot of these different places within Africa, and it talked about how it says gambling has been associated with petty and serious crime, domestic violence, family breakdown, and mental health problems. And it says that in Zimbabwe, where youth unemployment is very high, young people use gambling to fund crystal meth habits as well. So even coming in with these types of drugs as well, bringing that part into it. And so I wanted to bring the story up because I think it's really important to take note of how European customs, European ways of doing things that are really destructive, because there's mostly what Europeans do, most of the creations that they come out with, most of the habits that they put forth have destructive means and destructive ends. And when we start to take those things on as African people, those destructive means will come into our lives and we won't know exactly how to deal with them because they're not ours. They're not of our making. And so when you decide to take on foreign habits and things that are put forth to you as something that's harmless, but you really don't know what it really is because you have no real concept of it because you didn't create it, then you're not going to be able to address it in the ways that you probably could if it was something of your creation. And so I think just, it's important to see and to think about how we as a people, whether we're here on the continent, whether we're here in America or in the diaspora or on the continent, can start to really educate ourselves and others in different places that really don't know what's going on in terms of the stuff that America creates that we should not be taking on and what the downsides to all of these things are, because these African countries are in essence, not keeping it out. When people want to argue about China and what China doesn't allow in its country and how it doesn't want to allow this stuff from the West, it makes sense because you need to be able to protect your people. And there's things that you should just not allow to be able to come in. And there's certain industries that should just not exist.
Hey, appreciate you bringing this. I'm going to do some. I didn't have a chance to read the article, but I'm going to check out this article and do some more research. I want to look at some of these companies that are involved. You may know already. I'm thinking, hey, Natasha, we might need an article from you. Might need an article from you on this. This is serious. And it's crazy because the colonizer, you can see how the colonizer behaves. It's this pattern of what is illegal and what is legal. It's all dependent upon how it benefits the colonizer. Because I mean, gambling was illegal. I mean, when I was growing up, there was gambling that took place in Vegas, but outside of Vegas, like anywhere else, it was illegal. You get caught gambling, doing anything, you could go to jail. Outside of the lottery, which was illegal at one time, and they took over the lottery. But today it's like, you got all of this online betting on sports. It has become normalized. But we do know the addictive, that gambling can be addictive. It could destroy families. It has destroyed families. And the reason that people gamble as well is this desperation. A lot of people do it out of desperation. I've seen so many working class people every day going to play the lottery, looking for, ways to make money under the system of colonialism, right? Some people just want to make some money just so they can pay bills and get by. Some people are looking to hit that $1 million jackpot and be a part of the bourgeois, right? These dreams and aspirations to be a part of that class. So there's like this desperation that's needed in gambling. At the end of the day, the house always wins. We know that, so the colonizer knows what he's doing. He doesn't care. that he's destroying people's lives, right? That he's exploiting masses of people. He just wants to make money. Anything the colonizer does under the system of capitalism is all about how much money they can make, not the type of impact or effect that it's going to have on society. So I'm gonna leave it, Frank, if you had any thoughts on this. Well.
Yeah, let me just give a quick, like, I mean, like you guys said, once the colonizer will always be a colonizer, you know. You see, most of the time, these Westerners, they always take advantage of our situation, you know, of our circumstances. You know, they created the situation we find ourselves in, our circumstances, our problem, our issues, and they capitalize on that too, to continue on, you know, their inhumane activities on African people. I mean, like Natasha just read the article. I mean, some of the reason why, you know, people are actually dying, you know, or committing suicide, like the article said in there. Imagine, right? Someone don't really have money because, like you said, you know, during the days, back in the days, our forefather in time, you know, people who gamble were people who have money. Okay, we're not poor people. We're people who actually have money. They were the one that gamble. And in Africa, gambling was like a taboo. You know, you never easily, you know, saw people gambling because it was like a taboo doing that. But nowadays, they commercialize it and make it seem that, you know, it's something very great, something that will make you rich. But the reason why people are frustrated and committing suicide in some instances, especially on the African continent, imagine you don't have money, you know, you have your last bread and you go, you gamble it and you lose it. And sometimes the money is not even for you. Okay. Either your parents sent you, gave you that money to go in the market to buy food, and you win and gamble it. Okay. And then coming back, you don't have it, or you even have your family back home waiting for you, you know, to come back to bring something. And you, when you hustle, got some little money, instead of you going home and you went and gambled it and you went home, your kids, your wife, they are hungry. You don't have it. That alone, you know, it frustrates you, especially gambling is addicted. It frustrates you and you can't provide for your family, you can't provide for yourself. And sometimes, in some instances, you commit suicide because the money is not coming to you, it's going back to the colonizer. So they use our situation, our circumstances to exploit us more and more. And that's why, you know, we need to educate our people. And this is where too, government too need to get in, because like what we're saying here is these Westerners, they are also protecting those individuals, Westerners that are leaving from here, going to the African continent to exploit them, because they are exploiting the people and bringing the resources back to America or back to Europe. And they are bringing those money or the resources and putting it into the Western economy or the European economy. So for that reason, they're going to protect those people. And that is why they have law that you cannot charge their citizen in another country. They are the one to charge your citizen. You cannot judge your citizen in another country. So their citizen commit crime in another country, they bring their citizen here and protect their citizen. But if an African citizen commit crime in America, they're not going to say, oh, you are African, we're going to send you to the African continent so we can judge you there. They're going to judge you in America here, and you serve the jail time, that 20 years you serve the 20 year, and then after the 20 year, they send you back to where you came from. But these nations, these Westerners, they protect their citizens because they are the most criminal in the world. Criminals know how to protect criminals. So because they are criminals, they pass law to protect one another. They pass law to protect their citizens because they know that their citizens are criminals and their citizens will go in another country and do crime there, okay? And they are caught, they have to bring them back here so you cannot punish them. That is why they do, to protect their citizens. So the African leaders and African authorities, they just got to protect our citizens too, or their citizens, when these people come in Africa and carry on these kind of activities.
Yeah, indeed. Appreciate that. Hey, the panel, Natasha, Frank, y'all on fire. The chat is on fire. it's like all these comments. I'm like, man, I want to show all of them, man. I want to appreciate you guys coming. Of course, Comrade Sayero, always coming with the fire. But I appreciate all y'all. Make sure y'all liking and sharing too. So Frank, I know we got 20 minutes in, but you're going to be discussing your topic tomorrow too, right?
Yes.
So maybe you can just let people know what you're going to be discussing and what time that they can check you out.
Yeah, I'm gonna be discussing because last week we talked about last week we talked about the United States ambassador in South Africa accusing South Africa of supporting Russia or giving ammunition to Russia, right? And it said the United States ambassador apologized, or the United States apologized. The United States did not apologize. All right. So we're going to talk about that the United States did not apologize because we did not see evidence, we did not see video, and we did not even see article that say these are the things that he said all by himself. We only saw things that people were saying that he apologized. So he went on public media, on air, to accuse the nation of supporting Russia, and we did not see him on air, okay, apologizing to say, he apologized. Those allegations was wrong. And the reason why I say that is because we have had Western journalists who came out, okay, in their interview saying that, and the way they conducted the interview is saying they were actually saying the United States did not apologize. They were actually saying the ambassador did not apologize based on their interview. So we're going to discuss that tomorrow. And we're also going to look at the United States action against Uganda because Uganda stands to protect her citizens. Uganda stands to protect her people, the youth. Uganda stands to protect her culture, her heritage, her identity. The United States is against the protection of Ugandan citizens. The United States is against the protection of the Ugandan heritage, the African identity, the African norms. The United States is against it. The United States is against African rising up. So because of that, Joe Biden have planned to threaten Uganda to put sanctions on Uganda because Uganda want to protect her citizen, and the United States does not want it because the United States want to destroy the life of Ugandan and the life of African, because the United States is a colonizer, is someone who destroys society, someone who destroys the African people, African nation, African identity. The United States is against the protection of African because Uganda has stand firm to protect the African population and the African youth and the African masses. The United States is against that and threatening Uganda to put sanctions on Uganda because she wants to destroy the African population. So we're going to be speaking about that tomorrow.
Frank, can you send me the link for, since you're not going to be able to present it here on the show, can you send me the link for the article or the video on the topic of Uganda and the sanctions? Because, Russia, when they stood firm on their policies as it regards to, how they view sex and marriage and all this other stuff, we didn't see the U.S. put sanctions on Russia. Who else, who have we seen the U.S. put sanctions on because of their own internal cultural policies that do not fit this universal idea that is being put forth by the West, or even by America, or even by, Britain or whatever, that are going and telling these other countries, this is how your culture should be. These are the norms, like you're saying, that you should have. And if you don't have the norms that we have, we're going to put sanctions on you. What countries around the world that are not doing what America is doing are they putting sanctions on?
And they never put sanctions on Saudi Arabia either. And in fact, just speaking of that, the United States should have put sanctions on the Florida governor because Ron DeSantis just threatening the black LGBT, because he said in his article, his bill that he came out with, he said certain LGBT individuals will not go to Florida. So what that means, certain LGBT individuals, they are talking about black people, because he make Florida a hostile environment for black people. So the United States government is not talking about that to put sanction on DeSantis, who threatening black people from going to South, or how they call it, or Florida, who threatening LGBT from going to Florida, right? But they got a gust to talk about African nation. When Saudi Arabia is there, Saudi Arabia have death penalty. The United States is not talking about, but rather making business with Saudi Arabia, making business with Qatar, making business, with all these nations around the world that are against LGBT because they want to protect their citizens. But the United States got the guts to always look down on Africa. But again, sometimes I believe the African leaders, because of the disunity among them.
No, appreciate that. So it sounds like it's going to be on fire tomorrow. So y'all make sure subscribe to the channel if you haven't already subscribed. Appreciate everybody tuning in. Make sure you like and share so we can get subscribers up, be able to touch more people, more Africans as possible, to bring people into these conversations because they're very very important. And it's important that we control our own narrative. What has happened for centuries is that the European has been able to control the narrative about African people, about our struggle. So we want to determine the way that we fight, the way that we struggle, the way that we liberate ourselves. We want to determine those things. Malcolm X taught us that a long time ago. Don't struggle within the ground rules of our oppressor. And Huey P. Newton also educated us on that. So what I want to do, let me see, we got like 15 minutes, man. I'm going to read a couple paragraphs, but we're going to come back strong next week and read a whole lot more. So I'm going to share my screen just to get us started, man. I want to appreciate everybody being here. We're reading Stolen Black Labor. If you look in the chat, there is also in the description, there is the Google Drive link where our books are located, and you can find this book, Stolen Black Labor, there. All right. So again, this is Stolen Black Labor, the Political Economy of Domestic Colonialism by Omali Yeshitela. Omali Yeshitela is the current chairman of the African People's Socialist Party. And as I talked about earlier, the raid on the activists of Cop City, their homes, the raid on the organizers for the Solidarity Fund, they have been arrested. The chairman, as well as other members of the Uhuru movement, also had their offices raided and are currently fighting those charges. So this is what's happening now. This is the current state. It's like the 60s all over again. But it won't be the same results in the 60s because the people are not having it. So we're going to start from chapter 1, the revolution in political economy, the point of view of the slave. I'll go through a few paragraphs and then we can discuss before we close out. So the history of the United States and the entire history of capitalism has its origins in the attack on Africa and the unprecedented death of tens of millions of Africans. This study uncovers the concrete evidence of the amount of wealth stolen from African people by the ruling class of the U.S. over the last 4 centuries, amounting to a minimum of 4.1 trillion in stolen labor alone. When the merchants of the very small European principalities began taking Africans as slaves in the late 1400s from the west coast of Africa, states such as Songhai and Ethiopia far surpassed the organizational, cultural, and economic development of Europe. But the continued depopulation and dislocation of ever further expanses of Africa caused devastation of those societies and interrupted the history and the economic development of Africa. The procuring of slaves, which represented ready-made capital, human capital for the production of Europe's first commodities on the agricultural labor camps of the New World, allowed European and North American wealth to accumulate on unheard of scales and laid the basis for the establishment of modern industry, transportation, and world economy. The slave trade and the slave colonies gave birth to the capitalist class, those who control the labor of masses of peoples through privately owning and controlling the factories, tools, and distribution system of a complex economy in whose interest state power functions. In addition, it gave birth to the modern proletariat of the colonizing nations, those who are compelled to work in the factories of the capitalists in order to make a living. The existence of both classes in the imperialist center is contingent on the enslavement of African people and the subsequent colonization of the rest of the world. The ruling class in the imperialist center has produced analyses which are called political economy or simply economics in order to explain the workings of the system of production and distribution under capitalism and to plan for their security and well-being. The North American left in the imperialist center, which has declared its role as leading the workers of the U.S. society, both black and white, has failed to make an independent or revolutionary analysis. This left, which is in essence opportunist, represent a North American petty bourgeois interest and even contends for control of the production of exploitation of the African domestic colony and of other colonies around the world. For this reason, the reality of African history, of African struggle, of African interests are left aside as pure abstraction. I could stop there because we short on time. But any thoughts? Just on that last paragraph, though, I'm glad he raised the point of the left, particularly like the white left, because when I think of the white left, I also associate them with the Democratic Party as well. Not saying that they're all Democrats, but whether they're in the Democratic Party, Green Party, whatever, a party that's supposed to be representing the workers and the poor, they still have, I think, bourgeois analysis. I still, think that this white left, at the end of the day, I'll just say this: when it comes to colonialism, when white people came to this country, they all were colonizers. It wasn't just this sector of white people who were colonizers, settler colonizers. All white people came to this country as immigrants and invaders, and they colonized and they built this system up for their own benefit. And so there has been a struggle between these white people, the ruling class and the workers, over the economy, which always excluded black people, which always excluded African people. And so I think we have to be very clear on that, because anything that's rooted in our liberation has to be rooted in the African experience. So I think he's going to get deeper into that. But if y'all had any thoughts, go right ahead.
So I had two thoughts. I'm going to start with what you said, and then I'll go back up to one of the things. I think one of the things that I thought about in relation to, what he's talking about in terms of the North American left, and he talks about, here both black and white left. And I 100% unite with what you said about, the white left and their pretense of, liberalism, of not us whites, we're the good whites, and we're the ones who are, here to help get through. And, one of the sayings, I forget, this is not an exact quote, that I've heard before, is just like, okay, well, if there are so many good whites, then why is this situation the same as it is? If there are so many of you, if all you, white leftists are the ones who are the good ones, who are against all of the oppression and all of the capitalism and neocolonialism, then why does it even still exist? Because you sit up in there in those government offices and you can make laws. You go over to these countries as ambassadors, as head of NGOs, and you go over there and if all of you who are doing what is quote unquote, you environmentalists, all this other stuff, then why is this stuff still going on? If you outnumber, if you outnumber those who are quote unquote the bad whites, as it would be said. And the other thing about it too is when we think about colonialism, especially like, let's say example here in America, when the Europeans came over, those merchants, as going back to your point, Kimba, when they came here, they were given incentives the more whites they could bring here to settle, they got rewarded for that. They got, they got rewarded with more, quote, with more land that was not theirs. So the more whites they could bring in, the more land that they were able to get. So as you said, all of them are part and parcel of the whole process of, settler colonialism. All of them are, there's no distinguishing between, one or the other, because you're still coming over, with Europeans to settle land where people already live. And then on top of that, we could even get into all of the battles over land that happened, and the massacres that happened to indigenous peoples for that land by those who they weren't even the ones who, the first ones who came, those who got the free land, those who were settled, those who came because they were fleeing persecution, whatever, came and would slaughter and fight against the indigenous people to get more of the land. Irish, Scots, other Europeans that were coming in from Britain and the Dutch, all of them, literally fought and killed, just like when they would be lynching and going after, killing babies, burning down villages. They all engaged in that process in order for them to be able to get the land that they have. And so another point I thought about too was in terms of, and then I'll leave it here because I'll let Frank put in what he wants to say, is also when we think about going back to Africa as African people and who's going over there, right? When we think about celebrations of New Year's and, Serena Williams going in and, has her venture capitalist a business or firm, people who are going over to build businesses and creating businesses that, and we think about us as Black people, when we think about going back, right, what does that mean? And if you're a Black leftist and you think, like, oh yeah, I'm going to go in there, I'm going to go back to Africa, yeah, that's my homeland, but then you're going there and you create businesses that people on the continent can't access. You price things out of their range. You're not paying them what what they're worth. Like that is in line with this Black capitalist mentality, this Black bourgeois capitalist mentality, if you're going over there to do that. And so I think that's one of the things that as African people, when we're going back to the continent and we say that is our motherland, make sure that you're thinking about, okay, what are you doing when you go over there? Are you just creating more of the same? Or are you really going over there to build connection? Are you going over there and separating yourselves from, those of us who are on the continent already? How are you building a bridge, and how are you creating so that what you're doing is benefiting the people that are there? You're giving them and sharing, and it's like a reciprocal thing, not that you're going over there to exploit and to take out, just like any other European capitalist leftist would go over there and do.
Yes, and just to add quickly before you came at close, just to add to what you guys said, the most disturbing thing about this whole white supremacy or neo-colonial or the colonialist, right, or the imperialist, they themselves, right, they always goes against, all right, someone that look like them who want to speak against the ill. So what I'm saying here is the few good white who understand the struggle, okay, and the freedom of African people, who understand the system, the systemic system of white against Black, who understand and want to speak against it and want to be on the side of of Black people, right? Let me not say on the side of Black people, who want to be human, who want to be on the side of humanity. That is to say, those oppressors, they are not human beings. But a few white who want to be on the side of humanity, all right, they are also lynched by their fellow white. That is to tell you how dangerous these folks are in.
Oh yeah, very dangerous, very dangerous. Anything to protect the status quo. They will eat their own. So with that being said, though, we're going to continue to build on this. I know the hour went fast. We didn't get a chance to like really dive into this study, but we'll be back next Saturday, and I think we'll try to get more of the reading in next time we get together. I want to appreciate everybody for joining us, though. As always, make sure you like this podcast. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, and make sure you share it with your folks as we continue to build. All right. So until next time, man, we charge colonialism. And peace to everybody out there. Uhuru, Amani. Take care.
Peace.
Power to the people.
Free them all.
Free them all. Free them all.